human I can depend on to bring me happy. Ooh. Thank you, happy.
Well, hey there! It has been a long time since our last week's interview and episode. We're both glad you're here on Broadcast TV's single source for you to follow a gallant crew or two on Trek. This is a captain's log. I'm Lily Fox-Lim, a wide-eyed, wayfaring Trekker, prospering in all things favoring and flavoring of Star Trek. And Brian Croix is with us, so glad to be back with you side by side today.
Absolutely. What an introduction. Yes, thank you. I'm sharing the warmth of Trek flavor in your favor. Is that how you put it, Lily?
Yes.
Justly awesome. You're quite possibly the best Trekkie I've ever met. No, actually, no question. You are the best Trekkie I've ever met. So we are all honored to have you bring Trekkie knowledge to the heart, our fandom, and each and every week. Now we have the quickest news segment this week, Lils. What do you think?
Okay, let's go. Here on A Captain's Log, we'll discuss future developments in as much detail as possible on Star Trek Starfleet Academy, but you would have to be a Denevian slime devil living under a moon rock to not know by now that Mary Wiseman is going to be a part of the cast of the new upcoming Academy series. So many one-liners she shared in the final season of Star Trek Discovery points to this,
She did.
as in being among her, quote, cadets. Cast members have officially been announced for the 2025 streaming TV series on Paramount+.
Yes, I can't wait for that series, Lils. We're all enjoying Star Trek Prodigy's 20-episode second season on Netflix right now. But then there should be Lower Deck Season 5, which we can't wait for. Yes. And of course, we get to see Strange New World Season 3 before we get to see all the Star Trek Starfleet Academy series anticipation that's leading up to it. But Lily and I got your back on updated inside Star Trek news as it comes into our visual range on our sensors.
Sensors and subspace communications indicate Star Trek Discovery characters will make guest spot appearances in Star Trek Starfleet Academy.
Yes.
I'm sure this is where we'll see Sonequa Martin Green's Michael Burnham give Tilly a friend from afar, reuniting.
Yes, we love Mary Wiseman as Tilly, absolutely, don't we, Lily? It's a foregone conclusion that she's going to be in the cast. And you know, I'd really love to see Captain Burnham as well, right? In the Starfleet series, like maybe just one or two times.
One or two. Oh,
something like that. I think she's going to show up, though, in the Michelle Yeoh Section 31 film, though. Ooh. That's just my prediction. Ooh. Don't know if it's a fact, but we sometimes have insider info, right? So, Lily, we have a significant second part of our interview with Andrew Probert that we would like to get right into. Lils, I believe you have the next question.
Ooh, that I do, BK. Andrew, please talk about coming aboard this new series, how you were hired and designing the interior sets on the Next Generation, most notably the Enterprise D bridge.
I was calling Paramount, and it was like, what's this I hear about a new Star Trek show? And I got to Gene's office and talked to his assistant, Susan Sackett. Yeah. And she confirmed all of that. And I said that I would like to apply for work on the show. And so a meeting was set up, and I was asked to come down and show my work because Gene wanted to see what I'd been doing since the motion picture.
Okay.
So I took my work down, showed him the work, and they actually hired me as the 5th person to work on Star Trek The Next Generation.
What? Susan Sackett brought you in, and Andrew, you were literally the 5th person ever hired to work on The Next Generation.
That's crazy. What?
They wanted to have plenty of time before the show started cranking up to decide on what this new bridge was going to look like, because the bridge was going to be the center of the show. You know, you're spending so much time on the bridge. They wanted to make sure that it worked in all aspects. I got an outline as to what the bridge requirements were going to be. The new ship was going to be larger than what we'd seen.
Okay.
And it was going to have 2 segments. There was going to be a main ship and a battle section attached to the main section.
Oh, yes, the Enterprise saucer separation. I'll bet your head was full of ideas for that, Andrew.
My head went every which way. I did so many drawings. So now this is going through my head. And I'm also thinking, well, what does the new show logotype look like? Is it the new generation, the next generation? They hadn't decided on even a title for the show.
Really? God.
So I was going through all of these ideas. So back to the bridge designs.
Mm-hmm.
Gene's edict was that it have a view screen that dominated the front of the bridge like never before. He wanted there to be fewer crew members. He did not want people hunched over their workstations waiting for something to happen.
Yeah.
So the idea was that the duty crew on the bridge, in this initial thinking, was the captain or whoever was in the command chair and 2 duty officers and maybe 1 roving officer. So the duty officers would be navigation and helm.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be the commanding, the center seat occupant, and maybe a roving officer. And the back workstations, because we took all those stations and congealed them into the back 5 or 7 workstations.
Yeah.
That were multitask. So you could call up and say, okay, I'm going to sit here and now this is going to be an engineering station. Or I'm going to sit over there and that's now going to be the lunch menu. I don't know, whatever it is that you wanted it to be, you could just tap something and that would reconfigure that workstation to what they needed, science, whatever.
That's so cool. On the versatility of those back bridge workstations and that bridge crew design that we're all so familiar with on the Next Generation bridge. I always loved the sleek design and ease that the bridge crew had and those workstations as well. But Andrew, can you talk about the captain and view screen and perhaps other ideas you had for a versatile Enterprise D bridge?
One thing I wanted to address was the captain, when he wanted to stand up and talk to somebody on the view screen, has to walk around navigation or helm or whatever to go do that. I thought, let's just separate those so that the captain can stand up and walk directly up to the screen.
Nice. Yeah.
In doing that, the little beacon that says red alert is missing. So I took that and I put it under the view screen along with the little readout lights that we saw from the series. So both of them back on the show, Next Generation. There's a dedication plaque. So, and there's a ship's configuration or whatever. There were 2 plaques that were on the original series bridge.
Yeah.
Either side of the turbo lift. So I took and I put those on either side of bridge, basically, over those food replicators, which were never used.
That's where the food replicators were. What? That's where be? I've heard about the original idea for food replicators on Picard's bridge, and I know right where you're talking about, yes.
That's amazing.
Below that, there's a black, and then underneath, there's these little openings for food, which is like out of order.
A captain's log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log, where we bring you the most cutting-edge interviews with the cast and crews of all things Star Trek each and every week. Andrew Probert had such an impact on Star Trek's look and feel inside and out in space, from the ships to the quips of finite details in space docks that weren't meant to be humorously similar to NASA in the late 1970s on the first Star Trek motion picture, but rather a practical approach to the needs of the many. Humanity.
A Vulcan axiom perhaps most fits here. We are all quirky and unique. That's what makes us wonderfully human. Art illustration is where a wonderfully made idea is embodied on paper and then onto final design and ultimately set construction. Now, the word normal has no claim on humanity's infinite vision and possibilities through art. Andrew Probert made certain of that. Now let's get back to our interview.
God, absolutely.
Spark myself out of the pain.
Yes, the Vulcan power of the mind. Andrew, talk about that painting right behind you, a very familiar one we used to see regularly in Captain Jean-Luc Picard's ready room on The Next Generation.
This painting, right here. It's a print, of course, but Rick Sternbach and I thought, the captains usually, at least in movies, have pictures of their ship on the wall. Let's do that for Picard. So we put our heads together, and Rick turned out, because Rick is like an award-winning astronautical artist. He's amazing. And he created this gorgeous background, which you can see right here. And I plopped on the ship, and we hung that on Picard's wall.
Yeah, that original painting, I saw it again in the Star Trek Picard series years later. I believe it was like season 2. That painting, it's come full circle, but it should have come back to you, Andrew, or Rick Sternbach.
Exactly. I'm sure you would have lent it to the Picard series production if they had asked nicely. Andrew, with your ship designs being so magnificent, did you also design the model ship in Captain Picard's ready room?
Then we thought, a lot of times captains will have maybe a model or something of their previous command. So we went into Picard's background and found out that his previous command was the USS Stargazer, a scientific deep space vessel. And so he and I, again, put our heads together, came up with the Stargazer miniature made from kit-bashed parts, where they actually had 2 codependent engines for a further distance and maybe a little more speed, because it's a deep space science vessel. We made the saucer much thicker because that would house a lot of shuttlecraft and so on that would go down and find archaeological things on planets and maybe bring stuff up. I don't know. But, so we did that. Rick basically built most of the ship with me pointing and saying, do this and do that. Andrew,
talk about the sides of the bridge. This was different in season 1 as opposed to the whole rest of the seasons, all 6 of them later. Wesley Crusher talks about binars, and they're repairing things in the walls, electrical panels of sorts. They're open. But talk about your painting as well outside Dr. Crusher's office. There's these little nuances we'd like to know about your design.
If you look at the bottom, you'll see that there is a Japanese anime mech stuck at the bottom of the ship, because he and I both love anime. So he's got this robot sticking. If you get pictures of the underside of the Stargazer, because you'll see it, because when Greg Jean made a model for shooting for that episode where shooting captured or whatever, it goes back to the Stargazer.
Yeah.
The model that Greg Jean made actually replicated that anime figure on the bottom. So it's just a hilarious in-joke.
Can you briefly talk about saucer separation on the Galaxy-class Enterprise D and the emergency turbo lift to the battle bridge?
Yes.
Everything is perfectly organic. And they say, oh, and don't forget that the saucer separates from the engineering hall.
Oh, yeah.
Where? How? So then I had to figure that out. And luckily, I don't know how it happened, I came up with a docking cavity for the saucer sitting on the battle head of the engineering hull. And it all worked. But oh my gosh, what a ride that was.
Well, you proved yourself and more, making lots of career successes and money by drawing spaceships.
How do you stick organic shapes together and make them work, especially, just to make them work? And I couldn't, because the back of the saucer had to connect to the dorsal. I didn't know quite how to do that. And so I was sitting in Gene's office, and I think that I was trying to see him and just kind of talk about ideas, but I was still perplexed. So now this is going through my head, and I'm also thinking, well, what does the new show logo type look like? Is it the new generation, the next generation, they hadn't decided on even a title for the show.
Really? God.
So I was going through all these ideas, and it's funny. Basically, the first page of ideas also had up in the corner a drawing of what I thought the ship would look like. But my head's going in multiple directions with the battle section leaving the main ship. Later on, of course, they told me, because I was showing stuff like this, and it's like, no, the battle section is actually engineering, and the saucer is the main section. Just like it's always been, like even in the original series, the saucer was the main ship attached to the engineering hull. And you probably know that the saucer was even meant to separate back then.
Oh, it was? Really? Oh, wow.
Which is why you see those two triangles on the underside of the saucer. Those are landing feet that come down. They're supports.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Leaves, there's a third support out of the dorsal somehow. And it lands on that navigational dome. And then these other supports come down to give it a tripod support.
Oh my God, that's
Kirk
so
even
cool.
mentions in, I think, a show called The Apple. I'm not sure, where the Enterprise is being pulled down to the planet, and Kirk says to Scotty, save the ship. I don't care what you do, break out of there with the main section, the saucer, if you have to, but save the ship.
Star Trek The Next Generation, in its first season, 1987 to 1988, had a lot of creative people like yourself, Bob Justman, and many others see Gene Roddenberry's spin-off series gain momentum. Please talk about your memories and concepts for the new Enterprise D tactical railing and how you see lighting affecting the bridge consoles, and plus how Gene Roddenberry reviewed your designs.
At one point, the producers wanted to have a conference table on the bridge. So I'm thinking, okay, so let me think. So Card and all of the others are going to stand up and they're going to walk back 8 feet and sit down at a table to talk about what they needed to do, and then make a decision and then go back and sit down and do it. It seemed very awkward to me. But, you know, you do what the client wants. So I did some sketching with the table, and then I created and I elevated the work platform in the back, and it had the walls and ramps around the work table, and then I had this tactical rail above all of that. So eventually it came around to where they decided, no, we're not going to have the table after all. We're going to have a conference room in the back. And that was one thing that I had on the Motion Picture Enterprise. It was an officer's lounge, a conference room in the back. And so I wanted to repeat that in The Next Generation as a consistent thing for Starfleet ships.
Yeah.
So so everybody thought that was fine. But I kept the tactical rail, and I kept the raised platform so that people behind could see over the command center and the navigator helm positions.
A captain's log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log, Broadcast TV's only Star Trek talk show. Lily Fox-Lim here. Brian and I are in the middle of a fascinating conversation with Andrew Probert, the most prolific artist and designer in the science fiction universe. Maiden Voyage is the title of this illustration, which includes many familiar Federation ships and a Klingon battle cruiser that Andrew Probert designed. Andrew set the standard for many years in ship design and many more designs inside these spaceship gems. Brian, I believe you have the next question for Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Lily. Andrew, talk about the Stargazer and Greg Jean's design of the ship and your original exterior design of the Galaxy-class design concepts that you presented from the original art.
This electrician randomly walks through the waiting room, and he's carrying a cable. And I look at it, and he's got it in his hands. And he's holding the cable because it's a long cable. It's not all bundled up, but this thing, imagine coming off his hands, and he's holding it like this. And it's a big, heavy cable.
Yeah.
And he walks through the office and he's holding it like, and I look at that and it's like, that's the back of the Enterprise. That shape is perfect. It goes, and it connects and it comes down into the dorsal. It's like, never mind, Gene, I got it figured out, So since the Enterprise from the motion picture had these phaser bubbles, Galaxy class is almost twice the length. It's like 12 times the volume of the motion picture Enterprise. So these bubbles would be really tiny and weird plugged along the ship. And so I thought, let's come up with something new. And so I created a phaser strip that went around the saucer, top and bottom. It went under the engineering hull, and there were two of them, top and bottom at the back, and lateral phaser strips on the engine, the pylons, the warp engine pylons, so that the entire ship was covered with firepower.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the phaser strip was that as the Enterprise is flying along and it's got somebody attacking it, the beam can move around the ship as it's flying, to keep firing, keep a track on whatever it's shooting at.
Andrew, having worked on the first season of The Next Generation, designing most of the ships, sets, and alien races that look like the ships at times, your design work defined the visual style of the series. Talk about the drawing and conceptualizing the Ferengi ship design in season 1.
Ferengi ship, okay. And it was described in the script as looking like a horseshoe crab, kind of a shell, Horseshoe crabs have these little legs, but they're basically a shell around. And so I started playing with that idea, and something that I've never liked are pincher bugs.
Mm-hmm.
So I put a pincher bug front on an extended part of this shell, kind of a neck with this pincher front thing on it. And that became the Ferengi ship. They said, well, it has this EMP, this electromagnetic pulse generator out the back of it that's really prominent because it needs to use that to disable ships that are pursuing it.
Oh yes, this is a very familiar design that was used for years to come on The Next Generation. Mm-hmm. It was that Ferengi Marauder. Really a great design, Andrew. It was.
They needed a Romulan warbird. And the whole story was that Romulans had been sort of on the QT, on the quiet. They sort of disappeared for a long time. And now they're coming back into an area of concern.
Yeah.
So now we needed to know what a Romulan warbird would look like. Mm-hmm. So we had from the original series, Romulan ship. It was kind of flat and it had little warp engines out to the extremities. The underside had a painting of a bird. And then later on in the original series, Romulans had adapted adapted Klingon battle cruisers as their own. So Romulans went from their culture to an alliance with the Klingons, apparently. I don't know any of that. So it's like, okay, so what would a warbird look like? Mm-hmm. We know what would a warbird look like? We know what the Klingon ships look like. So where would I go from here? So I started doing some sketches. I started with designs that we've already seen and tried to, so that I could stay away from those and move off into something different. And I was coming up with these bird shapes. So the front, the bridge, and the whole front of the ship would have this kind of a bird, seagull look.
Yeah.
And it went back into these wings. And that was looking a little weird for me. So for whatever reason, I connected the wing on the top with the one on the bottom. And then that's how I connected the front on the bottom into the bottom segment. And then I created these big cargo doors on the underside, and the whole bottom was designed to be a big cargo area. And between the engines was clear so that they could see each other and create this warp field. I thought, what if we took the Warbird and actually made it vertical to contrast with the Enterprise? So, you know, and the engines would be top and bottom, so they would still see each other. Space doesn't care where the warp is coming from. So that would work, and then they would all connect out the front for a bird's type head and all of that. And by that time, Gene Roddenberry had sort of been put into a back seat, and Rick Berman had become producer of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And so I showed this to Rick Berman, and I told him, I said, here's the logic. You know, you have this contrast of cultures and ship designs, so there would be no confusion. You know, not all look the same. He says, no, I like it better horizontally. And so that's where you ended up with the Warbird, which a lot of people admittedly love. You know, they like the look of that ship.
The observation lounge, where the main bridge crew would frequently talk about matters of exploration or a battle plan, had a very interesting set of Enterprise golden ships built off and to the side into the wood grain, and that lasted until the first 4 seasons of Next Generation. But tell us how this came about from your memory, please. Plus, share your origins of the Enterprise C, which was one of those little ships, that could also be later derived from your Probert concept design on the very popular episode Yesterday's Enterprise.
Now, the Enterprise in Next Generation is actually the 5th Enterprise in the line of Enterprises. And so I thought, well, let's see, you have the TOS, the original series, you have the motion picture, you have, let's see, so that's like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how do I get to the 5th one? And so I went back to the movie where we see the Excelsior, and I said, okay, let's pretend that the Excelsior is the B version. So you have the Enterprise A from the motion picture. Then you have the Excelsior, which is the B. And there's a C and then the D for the Galaxy class. Yeah. What does the C look like? I'll see if I can see. See? So I started thinking about what would that look like, and so I actually took a scaled side view of the Excelsior and a scaled side view of the Galaxy class. And I put them one above the other, mm-hmm, with space in between. And then I took lines from important things, like from the bow to the end of the warp engines. And then I went from the hangar deck, connected those, and the center of the saucer and connected those, and the front of the engineering hall and connected. And so I had all these lines radiating from the Excelsior to Galaxy class. When the Officers Lounge was built, first season, they had dressed that set with sculptures, what's called half hulls, which is a real thing. If you have a yacht or some sailboat, you have a half hull, HULL version of that, which is nice for display. So they had half hulls of all of these ships going from the aircraft carrier Enterprise. Did you know that the Navy tried to get Gene to change the name of the ship because it was the same as the Navy's carrier? So we went from the Navy carrier up to the TOS, or actually up to the shuttlecraft. Enterprise,
Mhm.
the space shuttle, and then the TOS, and on up through the. And they were like this decoration on the officers' lounge, back wall,
Yeah.
front wall actually.
Mhm.
So then they never used it.
Ambassador class ship. I love that design and the name.
Gene Roddenberry was asked to change the name of the Enterprise?
Oh, it's an alternate reality Enterprise. Yes, then the design can be different.
Okay.
I think.
Yes, I agree.
I leave after season 1, and suddenly they come up with, well, we need the Enterprise C. And Rick Sternbach was the designer of the moment. And you can ask Rick about how he came up with that design. People have suddenly latched onto that as now, this is what the Enterprise C looks like, not that Probert version. I, however, have a different story. And my story is that since the Enterprise has gone into an alternate universe, noted by the fact that there are details on the Enterprise that are different in this universe than the universe we know.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that the Enterprise C looks different than the Enterprise C that I know.
Yes, I guess.
I'm going to say that the Enterprise C looks different than the Enterprise C that I know.
Oh, let's design something, then we're ready to build it and film it right away. No, not so simple.
No.
Thank you for that, but please understand that I just draw the pictures. Other people come in and they build it and they make it real. So it's a group effort. I'm glad I had a piece of that action, and it was pretty much a fantastic experience.
Andrew, you said it best. Thank you for being with Brian and I on a captain's log today.
You know, we all know seeing is believing, but this is only a piece of the pie in the starry sky. Our show, A Captain's Log, aims to create a better understanding in the world of Star Trek and humanity for your ethics, entertainment, and life.
So you may flourish on our planet and stretch beyond your dreams inspired by Star Trek. Live long and prosper.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy. Ooh. Thank you